After a long and thorough search process, NCBA has named the organization's next Chief Executive Officer. Joining us now is the new CEO, Frazier. Kendall, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
You bet. You're no newcomer to NCBA or the beef cattle industry, but maybe for folks that are new NCBA members, give us a little bit about your background.
I grew up on a diversified cattle and grain operation in south central Kansas, attended Kansas State University, was in farm broadcasting for a few years, worked for one of our affiliates, the Kansas Livestock Association, and then in 1985 I had an opportunity to move to Denver and go to work for the National Cattlemen's Association, and then I've worked for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for the last 31 years.
Great history with the organization. And let's talk policy for just a minute. We hear a lot about government infringing upon private property rights. Give us an update of some of the work that the NCBA is doing in this area.
It's one of our most important priorities to push back attempts by the federal government to take away private property rights of cow-calf producers and landowners. And right now we're in court fighting the EPA proposed rule called the Waters of the United States. It's a massive land grab by the federal government. We're going to fight that in court. We've been joined by a lot of other organizations and associations that are land users, and that is one of the highest priorities of this organization right now, to keep that from happening.
Another issue we've talked a lot about on this show is the Endangered Species Act and how it affects particularly a lot of ranchers out here in the western United States. What is the update on that issue?
It can be devastating to landowners when a species is listed, and we need to reform that act. We need to get species off of that list and put more focus on the federal government doing that than putting species on the list. But it is very devastating when species are listing, and it is a tremendous erosion of private property rights.
Highlight some of the other policy issues that you'll be tackling over the coming year, Kendall.
The big one we're working on right now, Kevin, is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a multi-country trade agreement that will really enhance our ability to export beef around the world, especially in the Japanese market, where we are under a distinct competitive disadvantage to other countries around the world, primarily Australia. This agreement would lower tariffs for U.S. beef exports in Japan and make us much more competitive. We export about 10 to 12% of our production. Exports are the future for growth in the beef industry in the U.S., Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other question I want to ask you real quickly. I ask you this all the time whenever you're on the show, but you talk to a lot of people out in the country, and I'm just curious, what's the general mood and tenor right now in the cattle industry?
I would say there's a lot of apprehension in our industry right now. We've come off the market highs of 2015, and we've had some really tough times in the cattle feeding segment of our industry. We've had some tough times in the stocker segment of our industry, and we've seen calf prices down as much as $500, $600, $700 versus 2015. So I'd say there's some apprehension about the state of the industry right now, and what does the future hold for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a bumpy ride, but hopefully we're leveling out now, right?
Well, one of our keys is getting some of these export markets open around the world. The strong value of the dollar is hurting all agriculture exports for all commodities, but we've got to get these markets open around the world so we can export product.
Couldn't agree more. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear more from new NCBA CEO, Frazier.